All right.
Chicago, Midwest.
Nice. That Chicago DeFi Alliance.
Yes, they're based quite close to me. We're also known for hot dogs and pizza.
Debatable. Well, do you want to have a some debate over that one?
This is the pizza panel, right? I'll defend it to the death, but we don't have to distract ourselves from the more pressing issues.
Right. So, stablecoins, I hear. Yeah.
More specifically, secret stablecoin transfers.
Sounds good to me. Then the Tor can take the evening away.
Yeah. How to begin? I'm happy to talk about any aspect of this. We've been looking into privacy for everything, and transactions is a piece of that, and then private stablecoin transactions is another piece of it. But I don't want to take away from people who are working on sort of like we're more on like the technology supply side. I'm curious what people think of the demand side, like what the demand right now is looking at for stablecoins and private versus public stablecoins. I'm even trying to get as a like somebody building out the products and the protocols, trying to get a better sense of where users and governments and enterprises are thinking about these issues right now.
I don't know who's moderating this, but probably the right place to start is to introduce ourselves first, right? I'm guessing. Yeah. So, I mean, since you have been talking, Tor, why don't you start?
I'll make it really quick. I'm Tor. I'm the founder of the Secret Foundation, one of the many entities contributing to Secret Network. Secret Network is a blockchain that features privacy-preserving smart contracts that use encrypted inputs, outputs, and state. So the ability to build new kinds of applications in Web3 that have never existed due to that fun and interesting functionality. And I guess we'll get into some of those potential applications here.
So when did you first hear about the Tor network? Is that when you wanted to do a secret stablecoin network?
That's a coincidence. What about, I don't know, maybe we should just keep going around it. James, you should probably introduce yourself as well.
Sure. I'm James Waugh. I work as a community manager at Near, and I used to work with Tor at Secret Foundation. So I'm part of the secret ecosystem and very interested in privacy, identity, all things decentralized organization. And, Near is layer infinity. What more can I say?
Layer infinity. The future is near.
So is the past.
They're all one.
Yeah.
I'll go next. Yeah, I'm Harry Murata Thompson. I'm the CFO and CIO of Celsius Network. It is the crypto operating company that does the crypto lending being the sort of major core of the business. We look into all other ways to keep the community happy by allowing them to make money on their crypto token.
My name is Richard. I'm CEO of a decentralized Celsius called Quid. Quid.io is a Near and Polkadot lending protocol, and it uses a mix of uncollateralized, collateralized, and fiat collateralized models. And
very cool.
Product stage.
Nice. And you live in a spaceship.
I do. We're still a cave at this point, but once we attach engines to the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's pretty interesting. So we've got at least a couple protocols and a couple of these very interesting platforms that probably deal with a lot of this user level demand. I'm curious to learn more about both like Celsius and Quid and their approach to this stuff, because I've heard actually Alex talk about Celsius. I heard him on Crypto Banter or one of those programs, and I called in like a weirdo, and I asked him about privacy, and he was like, I don't think people really care about that. And he got me really mad. So I want to know if you agree, if you think people really care about privacy.
I mean, I think privacy is something that I mean, when he said people don't care about the privacy, I'm sure it means like, I mean, we can use the public blockchain and certain information can be made public. I mean, there's no reason to keep everything like, sort of all the transaction sort of behind the door. I'm sure that's what he meant by like he doesn't care about the privacy. If that's what he said. He speaks at a lot of different events. I mean, he's probably talking about 10 times a week. So, I don't catch him talk on every show, because if that's what I do, then I wouldn't be working and I wouldn't be doing my job, right? I mean, we do like, care about privacy, and what's confidential is confidential, and obviously like, Celsius going for, full sort of like, regulations and a license and all that kind of stuff around the world, what needs to be compliant and what needs to be private, we actually do respect what needs to be done. So, I mean, keeping the sort of like personal information, client data, that's something that we really, really care. Now, in terms of use of privacy coin versus like a public coin, so to speak, I mean, we do support some of the privacy coins. We don't, as long as it's trackable, if you know what I mean. So like, I mean, privacy is privacy, but at the same time, like, we don't want to get mixed into like, some kind of, like undesired business, right? I mean, that's not what the blockchain stands for. So, I mean, those are the balance that I think, goes into the equation when we talk about which coin we support, what we care, what we don't necessarily like, I mean, what we necessarily don't have to, pay the same kind of attention that banks do, just because we're in the public sort of like blockchain field, so forth. So I'm sure that's what Alex meant, and I think that's what we stand for.
Speaking of the balance and imbalance around things, one of the main demand side reasons for privacy solutions is exactly to protect against centralized whales like Celsius, which could front run its own users, and nothing is protecting that from happening, because you're the portal for the traffic and volume as well as the underlying piping. And with something more decentralized and owned by no one, plus privacy built into the block transaction clearing process, you have a unstoppable financial instrument. You need both of those elements, I think. Speaking from the demand side.
I think that was a statement, and there was no question to address there, right? Yeah, I mean, I do think that we do say that there's such thing as a CeFi in the DeFi world. And yeah, I think the Celsius does stand sort of like an in between that, like this is a CeFi for the DeFi world. And I mean, I do believe though that, whether or not that was by design, by intention, I think, during the ICO sort of craze 2017 to 2018, and majority of these projects are gone, and a lot of, I think, projects had this concept that we build it and people come. Such, sort of a completely DeFi concept, without like actually having somebody actually managing the project for managing the project's sake, not so much that you get in the way of what the price of each coin does, or what coin to support, or like where we're going to pull the weight, or whatever it is. That should be really left to DeFi. But I think any company, because it's a company, I think there is that sort of centralized, experienced management team should be sort of like addressing certain concerns. And as long as this is, as long as we are all operating in some variation of a fintech world, eventually we're going to have to deal with some kind of regulators, because they will come, whether or not you like it, they will come, and they like to have the sort of certain doors that they can go and knock. They don't want to go to knock thousands of different individuals who are behind the privacy door anyway. And they would like to see how are you protecting these people, and for them to be able to go to specific people and then sort of have that conversation. It's much appreciated, and then that actually leaves, I think, consequently, that leaves all individuals alone. I believe that.
So, before, I was going to say that I wanted to hear James's opinion too, because I know James is a very privacy passionate person. I don't know if he has a personal or near focused opinion. Either one would be great here.
Both. I don't speak for Near, same as I don't speak for Secret, but I think regulation is a big question mark for not only decentralized finance or centralized finance, but finance in general. I think we've seen craziness this week that leads me to believe we're at a tipping point, and we have tremendous demand for privacy because the current system doesn't work, because you have people just basically pickpocketing other traders, and this is why we have regulation to combat against these manipulative schemes on Wall Street. We don't want retail to get dumped on. Believe it or not, crypto is not about making the rich richer. At least I thought, when I joined this industry, we were gonna feed the people, get the pizza to the people, and hasn't been the case with DeFi, at least in my opinion. So I feel privacy is a huge missing piece, because otherwise you're just perpetuating the same problems that we're trying to solve.
I don't want to go ahead, man.
The same dream is get someone to deposit some dollars into their savings account and not have that be 2% APY, but have something more letting people get out of the cycle of poverty where they most need these financial services and they don't have access to them. And
I want to at least propose. I'm not moderating. I'm just proposing some sort of moderate in between for some of these things, because I can empathize with a lot of what Harumi is saying around the need for like doors to knock on and the need for some centralized control in cases where you're trying to build systems that are sustainable. And then I can also appreciate everything that's being said around, we want to build a system that doesn't work like the old system. We're talking about slotting in a lot of these companies into traditional fintech, but we're seeing how the traditional finance system is not democratic and routinely screws people. And this week has kind of laid it bare in a lot of different ways, regardless of who you agree with in the whole like Robinhood GameStop scenario. Like, it's at least brought the conversation back to the front. But I don't think this is an either or. And I think that's what Alex was implying when I heard him speak. And I wanted to at least clarify my perspective on that. It's not a choice between like everybody in the system needs to be anonymous and everything needs to be Moneroized. It's not these absolutes or this absolute of perfect transparency, because I don't think either scenario benefits end users. The reality is we're probably going to end up with decentralized and permissionless applications that run more like, permissionless protocols, and maybe they're user and community governed, or maybe enterprises have a hand in governing them. And you're going to have privacy protections that need to be built into those applications, because otherwise they're completely unusable. Any application that requires you to use private or sensitive user data that wants to be decentralized, you need those protections to exist to have this thing be decentralized. Otherwise, it's just another centralized application that somebody can exert outsized control over if they pull all of the strings. There's mediums in all of this. There's shades of gray we're going to have to explore. I just get frustrated when the conversation comes from, well, privacy matters, but we can't have a bunch of anonymous people running around, so let's stop the conversation about privacy. Privacy is about choice. It's about protecting people in the systems. It's not about just anonymity and hiding from the government and not paying your taxes. And every time I can correct that, I try to.
Well, let me ask you this, Tor, because I feel we often try to stop this kind of technology. And I wonder, if you can't stop it, we always use the word unstoppable when talking about some blockchains. And if you truly can't stop it, why should we try, and how can we address the challenges?
Well, we call things unstoppable. It doesn't make them unstoppable. We call DeFi decentralized. It doesn't make it decentralized, and it certainly doesn't make it finance. It just makes it permissionless leverage. So calling something's not going to make it that way. If we want protocols to be unstoppable, we have to build them to be unstoppable. And if we want to see if they're unstoppable, we have to attack them. And we have to see if they're vulnerable in the ways that we believe that they're vulnerable. And over time, it's an evolutionary process of attacking and iterating. And eventually, we're going to end up with the most robust possible protocols that benefit the most users. I at least believe in that evolutionary process, unless, of course, that evolutionary process is centrally controlled so that by the end of it, we only have three whales determining which exact systems we're going to be using for decentralized finance. And I'm not saying that that's an outcome that any of us are choosing or intending, but it is something that worries me because that's what happened in the legacy world. I am not confident enough that we've built in the right protections to not see it happen again.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we use that word unstoppable way too often. We like to think of these infinite tokens that will last forever, and it's really not true.
I mean, everything is unstoppable until it stops, right? Every peg is meant to break. The underlying mechanism by how that happens is there from the beginning. It's just a question of when. Everything that has a beginning has an end.
But then how do you pitch it? How do you...
It's a rocket that last moment. It's a rocket, and then it propels you forward. It drives evolution, but ultimately, how far can we get as a human race before we become extinct due to our own flaws?
So we're talking about sustainability. I'm curious, Harumi, how you think about sustainability with Celsius, because it seemed like you were implying that for sustainability's sake, or for these systems that we're creating to still be here in like 5 to 10 years, there's certain aspects where you do want these more like regulated organizations. So what do you think would make the systems that we're building in this burgeoning new financial ecosystem, like what do you think is critical to sustainability?
Well, I'm not saying that the regulation is necessary or not necessary. I did say, what my stance is that it is inevitable when there's so much money floating into some system, ecosystem, industry, it is inevitable that they come in. And then that's exactly what happened, right? Until the ICO craze happened, the regulators were like, Bitcoin, what is that? And then all of a sudden, like all these ICOs came in and a lot of projects are making so much money. That's when they decided to come in and say, this looks like and smells like a security. So whether or not we vote for them or vote against them, they will come. Now, and then how to deal with that sort of authority is up to the project. They can say screw with them, we'll take our chances, or say for the sake of sustainability and for our community, and in the best sort of interest of our customers, we will deal with them the right way, or whatever that you talk about, right? So that's something that you do. In terms of the project managing, sort of project operating smoothly, I do think that rather than saying the build and they come fallacy, I don't think that necessarily works. And then I think we saw that after, 80-90% of the projects already failed since the 2017, 2018. And if you look at the majority of the projects that came out around that time that somewhat grew up in today's era, they all have somewhat CeFi, at least in the fintech sort of an area. I think they all have some kind of sort of management that is running the operations. So that's where I say, in terms of management, it's not a complete DeFi. There's always some kind of central group that will lead a project to make sure that it is sustainable, it is doing the actually the right thing for the community, and it's also these central people go out and educate people, because you think about it, how many people really know blockchain in today's world still? What is it, 5% of the entire population, maybe even 2? And I think it's on us to be able to say this is what it can do. And then if you want to protect the privacy, or if you want to let go of privacy, that's entirely up to you. But this is what the technology can offer you, and then this is what the coins can do with you. And then within the whole coin range, there are certain there are some that are utilizing the public chain, and then there are some that are utilizing private chain. And what would you like to do because of the different consequences that you're going to have? I think that's all on us who are managing a project in the sort of somewhat centralized way, to be able to communicate that. So I think that it's not completely one or the other. It is a combination of the two. And I think that's what I was trying to say at the beginning.
Indeed, that is one thing that CeFi mechanisms have solved elegantly, is this interchain communication problem. Without someone ensuring your assets while they're moving in between these disparate ledgers, it's very similar to how these little trucks, they take ATM cash and bring it to one central location. Losses like that can be very very tricky. So since we have these two glorious protocols here, Near, which has its own sharding mechanism, and Cosmos, which was one of the first inter-blockchain communication standards. Just wondering if you guys see any alternatives to the centralized solution.
Well, I know the secret Ethereum bridge relies on a trusted setup, but the Near Rainbow bridge is trustless, and that means you can have a permissionless validation mechanism for the activity on that connection between Near and Ethereum, which really connects the protocols instead of just connecting the two networks. So I think that's really interesting. But if I may shill Secret for a minute, building on what Harumi said, it is a combination. I think one of the trickiest parts of understanding Secret is the duality of its public coin, Secret, and the privacy tokens running on the blockchain. So it's a combination which is easily confused when compared to the Moneros or Zcashes of the world. Secret is not a privacy coin, and it's accountable. It's a public blockchain with abilities to support all kinds of privacy preserving smart contracts. So I think that's a really unique approach that is underappreciated.
Yeah, not by me, but yeah, over there, sure.
Well, not by me either.
All right,
That's
Tor,
good
say whatever is on your mind.
Rather than reiterate James's kind words, I mean, and yes, so this as decentralization and centralization is a spectrum. Private and public, is also a spectrum. Like this idea that we call programmable privacy is basically what we're all describing. The idea that certain things should be public, certain things should be private. The application developer and the user should have a choice. And I always say that choice is really the pillar of privacy. When we're talking about privacy for users, we're talking about giving them choice. But this trustless and trustlessness nature of things, it's also a spectrum, and it's always a trade-off. There's always trade-offs between how centralized or trustless something would be and its performance or its cost or its usability. And we're all, as developers and entrepreneurs and product designers, trying to find our place on that efficient frontier to say, this is usable by users, there's demand for it, and it's going to function. It's also going to be compliant enough, but it also needs to be trustless enough to be sustainable and to be a meaningful improvement on the systems that have come before it. And we, as an ecosystem, we're always trying to use the best of what there is. In the Cosmos universe, there's a lot of these kinds of developments underway. James is very familiar with Peggy, but that's one of these efforts that's underway to further connect blockchains at the protocol level, where you're not relying on a proof of authority type of setup or, a single custodian. Or for example, RenBTC is effectively a single signer that's masquerading as MPC. But enough about that. I think that we're going to see a lot of this kind of experimentation and all of these different kinds of implementations, and it's going to be evolutionary. And at a certain point, we have to see more trustless solutions win out in the market. And if they don't, that's because of some failure on education, or it's because of some sort of other market failure. I don't know what. If we want trustless solutions to win out, we need to be educating users, and we need to be providing a meaningfully better experience. And if we don't provide that better experience, they just won't win.
Who's going to build the secret Near bridge? Cosmos Near.
What if I do this? Which direction is it? Is it over here?
We're both going to build it together.
I think Near as layer infinity thinks a lot about bridges. Secret as a privacy hub thinks a lot about bridges. But again, it's a different calculus for us than it sounds like, Celsius is its own thing. And then Quid is you're also talking about something that's sort of inter-blockchain, right? It's very interesting to see it on the product side.
The way that Celsius solves this problem on the product side is that it owns the ledger of the position on its own ledger, and it controls that. when you do inter-blockchain, you're kind of sending around an NFT that also has code baked into it about how each receiving chain should deal with the asset based on what kind of asset it is. And that way you have all these blockchains effectively sharing a DeFi spec without any of them having necessarily permanent custody of the individual user's ledgers. The centralized product, that's what you're kind of promised and guaranteed. It's always going to be safe. It's always going to be a database that we can take care of for you. And it is nice to have that guarantee for some types of users, I guess.
Well, users with billions of dollars, probably.
That they want
we're all lazy by nature, right? So isn't that nice that if somebody can just manage your money by kind of like, putting the money into a wallet? I mean, that's something. I mean, we are all solving, I think, different problems that we have. Problems as in different things that we can solve in the sort of financial services by providing our respective solutions. And in ours is, I think, a Celsius solution. Celsius problem solve was always how are we going to give the financial independence to these individuals by allowing them to make a little bit more money than 0.1% per year on their hard-earned dollar. And I would say that the fundamentals, the mission statement of Celsius is nothing more, nothing less than that. And while doing that, if we can use the blockchain solution to allow a little sort of like more independent sort of like way of managing your coins, is not nice.
At the end of the day, we are all shareholders of the same community of crypto devices. So,
and when it boils down, ETH is the common denominator to me.
Yeah.
And we think about Cosmos as the internet of blockchains. Meanwhile, they're busy trying to connect with Ethereum, and same with Near. So to answer the question from earlier, maybe we won't have to build a secret Near bridge. We'll just use Ethereum.
It's interesting. Fees willing. There's a lot of things that work on Ethereum and there's a lot of things that don't, but it's definitely not for lack of effort, and it's definitely not for lack of community enthusiasm. Ethereum is a massive experiment that's working at scale. Whether it becomes a global settlement layer, that sort of remains to be seen. In the meantime, I think there's room for dozens of more experiments to be run, and at the foundational level of protocols like with Near, with Secret, or at the application level like Celsius taking one approach, Quid taking another. I think the best thing we can see from this conversation is that both of these applications or both of these visions can leverage Near and Secret and Ethereum. Despite the fact that the visions are so different, there are components of each of these applications that can be leveraging our protocols. And that's really exciting because that means we can have experimentation at every layer of the stack, and should.
I love that moment where you said sediment and then settlement, because ETH, regardless of if it's going to be the application platform, it's the house of a lot of value, billions of dollars that have been mined in crypto. And regardless, it's going to be like an off-ramp for all of that to get out, at its least. It's always going to have to serve some function.
Let's hope.
Let's to our time. Thank you, guests, for this panel. It was really have a nice day wherever you are, whatever time it is. And it was nice having you and chatting with you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.